The current mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, is an exception. She doesn't even clear that bar. If you look at what Karen Bass has been talking about for the past decade, you'll find that, by her own admission, she was never especially interested in California. Instead, again and again, she's talked about advancing the interests of Africa. Here's just a small selection of her appearances on African media.
To say that our reason for coming as the contingent of the Congressional Black Caucus is really part of many commemorations taking place in the United States this year, commemorating the 400th anniversary for the arrival of Africans on the U.S. continent. I was involved in the 70s and 80s in the whole anti-apartheid struggle. Our history on the continent has not always been a great history. And so I think that there's things that we need to rectify, but at the same time, I would never want to tip it in the other direction and say that there's too many problems in Africa or Africa should be able to sustain itself, so let's cut off U.S. funding. There also might be other ways that our country can support the African Union so that they can put some teeth behind that when that type of statement is made. I mean, for example, when the coup in Mali happened and there was the need for troops to come in, you know, the Malians had to call on the French. The African Union wasn't quite ready to intervene, and they certainly did come along. But I think there's a variety of ways that the United States can help to shore up the infrastructure and capacity of the African Union.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home?
It's amazing, and also amazing that this is a Irish correspondent for a foreign news outlet who appears to care more about what's happening in Los Angeles than the mayor of Los Angeles does. Once again, watch.
Build stronger than ever. Right now, if you need help, emergency information, resources, and shelter is available. All of this can be found at URL. Los Angeles, together is how we will get through this. Through the heroism of our firefighters.
Apparently doesn't know how the internet works. I mean, it would be impossible to script a more on-the-nose satire of Democrats' priorities and total incompetence than what Karen Bass just pulled off. Pander to Africans, and then she transforms into Ron Burgundy when she belatedly returns. And in case you didn't catch it, she read the URL of the website as literally URL. During a disaster in Texas, quote, Ted Cruz fleeing Texas in the middle of a deadly crisis is part of a larger pattern of the GOP abandoning folks in crisis. We need to build a movement to kick them all out. That's why climate change is such a common talking point on the left, because it's their get out of jail free card when their incompetence becomes extremely obvious. Bernie Sanders, for example, just put out a tweet claiming that the wildfires prove that climate change is real. No one, even the alleged scientific experts, really thinks that that's true in this case. If these fires are the result of climate change, you certainly could get these events without climate change. Well, of course you could. Because the thing driving the fires is wind, and wind is not a product of climate change. We've always had wind. For as long as we've had Earth itself, there's been wind. And as for the origin of the fires themselves, well, that's a different question, especially since we were promised just a few years ago that electing Joe Biden would effectively end wildfires in this country. Biden said it himself after the last big wildfire he pretended to care about.
Donald Trump's climate denial may not have caused these fires and record floods and record hurricanes. But if he gets a second term, these hellish events will continue to become more common, more devastating, and more deadly.
Implication there is that if we elect Biden instead, we won't have them. And Biden became the president, as you may remember, and what do you know? We still have the wildfires. So it took less than 4 years for this particular climate change prediction to blow up in their faces, like they all do. We've gone from Biden will end wildfires to Biden will use wildfires as an opportunity to make personal announcements about his family, which is what he did yesterday. Watch.
We got this notification yesterday that their home is probably burnt down. Today, parents of the baby still standing, I'm not sure. But the good news is, I'm a great grandfather as of today. I have a granddaughter, a baby girl, a baby boy. So I remember this day for a lot longer than subsequent. Thank you, Brett.
Very
They stated that there's a shortage of firefighters in Los Angeles. Watch.
And then additionally, we heard repeatedly fire crews requesting help, backup, and not having enough crews. Were you guys prepared enough for this? Did we have enough resources to fight these fires? Thank you.
No, LA County and all 29 fire departments in our county are not prepared for this type of widespread disaster. There are not enough firefighters in LA County to address 4 separate fires of this magnitude.
Now, why might there be a shortage of firefighters? Well, it turns out that's not a great mystery either. Suspension and termination of more than 100 firefighters because they wouldn't take the COVID shot. Watch.
113 LA City firefighters have been suspended without pay for defying the city's vaccine mandate. In November, firefighters who had not submitted their vaccination status or requested an exemption were informed they would face suspension and termination. And
this new chief doubled down on DEI hiring. She went out of her way to diversify the ranks of the LAFD, meaning she wanted to hire fewer white men and more lesbians like herself. Watch.
I'm super inspired.
She took time out of her already busy schedule to tell us about her vision for the department's future, one that includes a 3-year strategic plan to increase diversity.
People ask me, well, what number are you looking for? I said, I'm not looking for a number. It's never enough.
Out of 3,300 city firefighters, only 115 are women right now. She's already looking at ways to change that. She's quick to point out that doing so has a greater purpose, attracting the best and brightest for the job.
They feel included, they feel valued, and they feel part of a cohesive team.
The chief also checks another box when it comes to inclusivity and diversity at this department. She's a proud member of the LGBTQ community.
That just kind of opens the door of people that thought, wow, I didn't even know that that was an opportunity for me.
Say that DEI is only concerned with box checking. Literally, that's the case. You just heard it there. And the people that you want responding in a situation like this when your city is on fire are men. You want male firefighters. We call them firemen. That's what you want. You want firemen showing up. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. But we're supposed to pretend otherwise, like we don't. And she got to work immediately, creating a DEI bureau within just 1 year. Watch.
Every day, the LAFD is called upon to respond to crises, and today it is taking a step to resolve one of its own. The department's first ever Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureau will launch in January, 1 year since its first ever female fire chief, Kristen Crowley, was appointed.
So by creating this new bureau, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureau, now we actually have the staff to do the work when it comes to doing a deep dive in regard to how we do business, how we take care of one another in the fire stations and in our work environment.
This stuff is so infuriating. I mean, just to ensure that emergency personnel would have as little available water as possible in the event of something like this happening. Watch.
These dams are coming down, and it's about damn time. Governor Kate Brown, Governor Gavin Newsom, U.S. Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland, and tribal leaders all coming together to celebrate the world's largest dam removal along the Klamath River Thursday. The groups meeting at Iron Gate Fish Hatchery in Hornbrook. Last month, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued the final approval of the historic plan to remove 4 dams on the Klamath River in California and Oregon.
So they redirect rainwater to the ocean and shut down the dams to save the fish and appease the tribal elders. And now they're apparently out of water to fight these fires. Firefighters are using traffic cones to scoop water now, as you can see in the footage here. Now, these are images that are going to be remembered many years from now. As the mayor of Los Angeles hangs out in Ghana and the fire department leadership pushes DEI hiring and the politicians empty the reservoirs and remove the dams and the brush remains uncleared, the rank and file firefighters are reduced to scooping water into traffic cones. This is what Donald Trump warned about just a few months ago on Joe Rogan's podcast. In fact, he's been warning about it for years. And now it's happened because no water is coming out of the fire hydrants. The businessman Rick Caruso called into local news to make that observation. Watch.
My heart goes out, obviously, to the people with their homes, and I'm watching the small businesses around us go up in flames. This is people's livelihoods, so it's devastating. But what is most concerning to me is our first responders and our firefighters who are trying to battle this. There's no water in the Palisades. There's no water coming out of the fire hydrants. This is an absolute mismanagement by the city. It's not the firefighters' fault, but it's by the city. And I'm going to be very honest. We've got a mayor that's out of the country, and we've got a city that's burning, and there's no resources to put out fires. So if you look at your pictures, you don't see the firefighters there because there's nothing they can do. And it looks like we're in a third world country here.
This is obviously an extremely damaging piece of information for local officials. That's presumably why an anchor at the local Fox affiliate tried to fact-check Rick Caruso and imply that he was wrong about this. And then he was immediately fact-checked by a Fox reporter on the ground who confirmed that indeed the firefighters are out of water.
Former LA mayoral candidate and real estate developer Rick Caruso criticizing the city's response to the windstorm and fires. He says officials should have been more prepared.
The real issue to me is twofold. We've had decades to go remove the brush in these hills that spreads so quickly. And the second is you've got to have water. And my understanding is the reservoir was not refilled in time and in a timely manner to keep the hydrants going. So that's a failure, whether on DWP's part or another city agency. But this is basic stuff. This isn't high science here. And it's all about leadership and management that we're seeing a failure of. And all of these residents are paying the ultimate price for that.
Despite what you have heard from Caruso, no firefighters have told us that they are running out of water.
And let's go out to Gigi Graciette. She is live in Pacific Palisades. I know your signal's not the best, but Gigi, what can you tell us?
Well, firefighters have told me they have no water on this block, and you may be able to make out the ember storm that we're in the middle of right now. This house going to be a total loss. They have no water to put on this fire. They are standing by because they're trying to save the home that is next to it.
So this is one of the most basic factual issues of this entire disaster, and the local media obviously has no idea what's going on. Neither do the people who are supposedly running the state. Yesterday evening, CNN asked Gavin Newsom about why there was no water coming out of the fire hydrants, and he had no answer to the question.
What is the situation with the water? Obviously, in the Palisades, ran out last night in the hydrants. I was trying the firefighter in this block. They left because there was no water in the hydrant here.
The local folks are trying to figure that out. I mean, just when you have a system that's not dissimilar to what we've seen in other extraordinarily large-scale fires, whether it be pipe, electricity, or whether it just be the complete overwhelm of the system. I mean, those hydrants are typical for 2 or 3 fires, maybe 1 fire. You have something at this scale, but again, that's going to be determined by the local.
Now, shortly after that interview was shot, another fire began in Hollywood Hills. Arson obviously seems like a strong possibility to explain a lot of this because California is a lawless state where no one, even arsonists, are prosecuted. But additionally, late last night, someone shot footage of what appears to be arson attacks taking place in the city. This is from the Santa Monica neighborhood. Watch.
We're at 302 Pico, and people are lighting fires now. You can see that lit a fire. These guys not all the people there, but some of those guys lit that fire, and they're actually, the trees caught fire, and then the palms are catching fire. So civilians are now lighting fires down in the so-called, flats around Santa Monica, Venice. So be safe out there. Fire department's been dispatched. We don't have enough water to put this thing out, but we're supposedly on the way.
Now, based on that footage and the sheer number of separate fires, it seems more likely than not that we're dealing with a series of arson attacks here, but not spontaneous combustion caused by climate change, but people setting these fires. But at the moment, we don't know for sure. What we do know, as this catastrophe continues to unfold in Los Angeles, is that no one is buying the climate change narrative anymore. The people running the state of California are simply too incompetent, too incoherent, to pull it off. Now, yes, it's too late for the people living in the many destroyed areas of Los Angeles, which are becoming more numerous by the hour. But the rest of the country now understands exactly where climate change derangement leads. Along with DEI and the rest of the equity agenda, it leads to destruction and blame shifting and ultimately total unmitigated apocalyptic disaster, which is what we're seeing happening in a major American city. And as entire enclaves and left-wing cities burn to the ground, the reality is now simply too obvious, even for the most committed members of the climate cult, to ignore any longer.